Welcome back to the show today. We're talking about this season's biggest rivals. Which players have the most competitive spirit between each other? I know I've talked about beefs and talking before, but this is a little different. We're talking about rivalries. So I think the most iconic and best example of an NBA rivalry is Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. The two went back and forth, winning NBA MVPs and championships throughout the entire 80s. So I'm told, I'm not that old. In the 90s, we didn't really have any rivalries because Jordan was too good. He dominated the whole decade. You can say that Drexler, Malone, Peyton were all his rivals, but it didn't feel like it, and I was there. In the 2000s, I think Kobe and Duncan were kind of the dominating forces. D-Wade and Dirk, that was definitely a rivalry. But are there any current rivalries in the NBA right now that are worth talking about? It seems like we're in an era where there's almost too much mutual respect amongst the players. After the game, everyone's joking around, dapping each other up, win or lose, they don't care, they're all grins. Which makes sense, these guys are all part of an elite group of human beings that have known each other since AAU basketball. Well, just because these players are friends does not mean they're not trying to embarrass each other out on the court. So let's start with a rivalry you may have forgotten about, Giannis Antetokounmpo and James Harden. When Giannis was a rookie, he got into a little scuffle with James Harden. Nothing crazy, but we can at least see there is some tension between the two. Giannis probably remembered this, but Harden probably did not. Harden was an all-star at that point in his career, and he probably wasn't sweating some young rookie talking shit to him during a blowout. Giannis and Harden's rivalry began in 2019 when they were both battling for the MVP. They both really wanted it. It was a close race, but Giannis ended up winning it by around 150 voting points. Harden was really salty about this, but I have to say I do understand his point of view. He averaged 36.1 points a game that season, and he played 78 games. I remember checking the nightly stats that season, and it wasn't crazy for Harden to go for 50 in 3 games in a week. Harden was on a Houston radio show, and he was baited into talking about how he didn't win the MVP. He took the bait.
Media, they create a narrative about somebody from the beginning of the year. I think they just take that narrative and then run with it the entire year. Like, people were tuned in on to how many points that I was going to score the next game, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was a thing. I can't control that. Only thing I can control is coming back next year and being better than I was.
Watching this back, I think it's totally fair the way that Harden described the situation. Giannis had an incredible season, but narrative definitely had a lot to do with it. And we all know that MVP voters do not like voting for a guy twice in a row, especially if he didn't win a championship. So I think Harden's response was actually really mature at this point, especially when Giannis had hucked a ball at his face earlier that season. A lot of people didn't really make a big deal about this, and neither did Harden. Listen, maybe I'm a but that looked like a hurt. Then in 2020, I'm sure you all remember when Giannis picked Kemba Walker over James Harden in the All-Star draft.
I'm between Kemba and Trae Young.
Wait, you don't want the dribbler?
I want somebody that's gonna pass the ball. That's what I want.
Harden was definitely the better player. Then during an interview with Rachel Nichols, Harden said this.
You know, but I wish I could just run and with 7 feet and run and just dunk. Like, that takes no skill at all. I gotta actually learn how to play basketball and how to have skill.
Obviously, Giannis's comments about Harden got to him. Then Giannis piled it on when a reporter asked him what his all-star team strategy was.
James Harden was guarding. You know, that's who we thought we're going to have the opportunity to score on.
A lot of this was provoked by the media. Charles Barkley definitely pimped Giannis into talking shit about Harden. Then it seemed like that entire purpose of that Rachel Nichols interview was to get Harden to talk crap about Giannis. And that's kind of where the outspoken beef ended, but both players are still very relevant in the NBA. It'd be really cool if we got a Clippers-Bucks finals and that rivalry would be reignited. The next rivalry I've talked about before, but I want to talk about it again. Luka Doncic and Devin Booker. This started in the Western Conference semifinals in 2022. The Suns were the best team in the regular season. I think most people thought that the Suns were going to trounce the Mavs. And they started to. They went up 2-0 in the series. But Luka and the Mavs won the next 2 games to tie the series. This was crazy because Luka was really the only star on that team. And if they got swept, people would have understood. It still would have been a good season for the Mavs. It would have been a step in the right direction at least. So this is the point where the rivalry begins. In Game 5, the Suns blew out the Mavs. During the game, while the Suns were up by quite a bit, Devin Booker did this.
Get up, boy!
He goes up for a layup, he gets fouled, he lays on the ground, pretends to be hurt, and then he says that's the Luka special. The Suns go up on the Mavs 3-2, and the Suns think they got the series. Then Luka says one of the coolest things I've ever heard an athlete say after the game. The next game, the Mavs blew out the Suns. Then in Game 7 was when Luka really embarrassed Devin Booker. In Game 7, the Mavs were beating the Suns by 30 at the half, and by the end of the third quarter, they were up by 42 points. It was personal. The Mavs weren't even substituting subbing their starters, they were just trying to pile it on. After Devin Booker said the words Luka special, he only scored 30 points for the rest of the series. Luka scored 68. We saw this rivalry fire up again last March when the Suns and the Mavs met again. Luka misses a shot with 4 seconds left in the game, and Booker uses this as an opportunity to rub it in. A little scuffle breaks out, and it kind of looks like Luka's enjoying it. Both guys are smiling pretty big. So I want to see these guys meet each other again in the playoffs this year. It'd be sick if we got a Suns-Mavs matchup. I don't know who would win. So I'm not going to talk about any of LeBron's rivalries because I've already talked about them in another video, so check out that video if you're interested. Not right now, but after this video. Let's move on to Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. Technically, both of them are rookies this year, since Holmgren was injured last year and he didn't play a game. Right now, they are both battling for Rookie of the Year. And Wembanyama is on top of the Kia Rookie of the Year ladder. His stats are slightly better than Holmgren's, but Holmgren has a better team. According to Vegas, one of these guys is going to win it though. Holmgren and Wemby actually have a history that goes back to 2021, when they played each other in the U19 FIBA World Cup. The US won and Wembanyama ended up fouling out. Holmgren may have won, but Wemby had a better game, scoring 22 points to Holmgren's 10. The first preseason game between these two, the Oklahoma City Thunder won, but it was a preseason game, so no one really cares. The two had pretty similar stat lines, but we got this sick moment between the two of them.
First exposure to top really getting on you as Victor gets the and one. And he's going to get another 7-footer, beautiful crossover, and he's going to win that battle.
Holmgren later tweeted out this clip with the caption, "Yeah, the headbutt is unstoppable for show," which I think is like the funniest way to say that Wembanyama committed an offensive foul. Both recognize that there is a rivalry between each other and they're excited for years of matchups to come. Sadly though, Wembanyama plays the 4 and Holmgren plays the 5. So in terms of them literally guarding each other, we're probably not going to see it all that much. But obviously, the biggest rivalry in the league is between the two best players in the league, Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. The two have been battling to be the best center in the league for the past 6 years. Aside from 2020 when AD was selected as the center for first team All-NBA. It was a weird year. These two guys have finished number 1 and number 2 in MVP voting the last 3 years. Both play the same position, but they excel at different things. Jokic is a triple-double king, and he's the best facilitator in the league. Embiid, on the other hand, has been the scoring champion the last 2 years, and he's an incredible rim defender. In fact, these guys are so good, I believe they stopped making all NBA teams by position, and they switched it to front court and back court. I think they thought it was weird that one of these guys was always second team NBA, and he was always the second best player in the league. Historically, it was just gonna look weird. Jokic now has 2 MVPs, and Joel has 1 that he got last year. Embiid for a long time was very outspoken about how he was disappointed he was never awarded the MVP, which personally I thought was kind of obnoxious, but last year he didn't say much about it, and he did win, and he really deserved it, even though he did duck Jokic in a game in March, and the Nuggets won that game. I actually respect this move for Embiid sitting out that matchup. Embiid needed rest. The season was coming to an end, and the Sixers were in a great position for the playoffs. If you're going to take an L and rest some of your players, make sure you do it during a game that's going to be tough and that you might not win. Play your starters when you're going to beat a team to ensure you get that dub. If Embiid would have insisted on playing, he would have risked injury, and for what? To maybe play the Nets over the Cavs in the playoffs? No, who cares? It would have been for Joel's ego to go up against the other contender for MVP. He ended up winning anyway because toward the end of the season, the Nuggets ended up hitting a skid. In the last few games, Jokic didn't play because they'd already secured the number 1 seed. Even though Jokic didn't win the MVP, he did win the championship. So at this point in time, Jokic is winning the rivalry. And this season is more of the same. Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid are neck and neck on the MVP tracker. And both teams are pretty close to the top of their conferences. Now, the real finals I want is the Sixers and the Nuggets. That would be sick. Nobody can duck anyone at that point. All right, let me know of a rivalry that I missed. I feel like sometimes you miss ones or they're just petty beefs and you don't really consider them a rivalry. It's just sort of arguments that guys that don't like each other. So I will reply if you tell me, or maybe I'll make another video. Like or dislike the video. I appreciate you watching. Be good to your mothers, eat a corn dog. Merry Christmas too. I think this comes out on Christmas.